No, Jack,
it's just loading up.
No, I will do it.
Councillor, I think it suits you.
First question, wasn't it? Do I need to go to?
Yeah.
Simple evidence.
Okay, we're live. I hope you can all hear me. I'm Julian Spence. I'm the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and I welcome you all this evening to all the members present and the officers. As you know, this meeting is being recorded, and I'd ask that you keep any comments brief and succinct, so we can get through what is quite a lengthy agenda. But before I start, if I could just go around the room and then on screen, if people could identify themselves and for everyone else. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Soane, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk in the meeting.
Rochelle Tapping, Deputy Bar Solicitor and Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Mavis Amuzuakwe, Financial Services Manager and Deputy Section 151.
Richard Bates, the Strategic Director, Finance. Pedro Frobel, Chief Executive.
Jerome Davidson, Councillor for Hindhead.
And Ken Reid, I'm Councillor for Cranley East.
And finally, I'm David Beeman, the Independent Farmers Council for Farm North West.
Thank you. And on the screen, I can see I'm going left to right here. I've got Matt.
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt Dean. I'm the engagement lead from your external auditors, Grant Fulton.
Thank you. Bit of an echo there. And then AJ.
Yeah, I'm AJ. I'm the audit manager for external audit from Grant. Sorry for the echo.
Okay, so we're going to have to sort that echo out. Iona is connecting to audio. So, Jose.
Hi, I'm Jose Ribeiro. I'm the housing fraud investigator at Waverley.
Thank you. And then Iona is still connecting to audio. And do we have anyone else on?
We have Councillor Mark Merriweather listening in.
Okay, good evening, Mark.
Evening, Julian. Yes, Mark Merriweather. I'm the portfolio holder for finance assets, Waverley Councillor for Farnham Moor Park.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. I shall now move to the agenda, but before I do, just an apology to members, I think, for the somewhat disjointed way that the papers arrived with you. I think that was sort of unavoidable to a large extent, but it's something we'll try and address for the next meeting.
Okay. We seem to have lost.
Have we lost our guests and the public? In which case,
I don't think
pause.
we'd actually lost them.
They just can't see you.
Just seem to have the screen seems to have turned itself off.
I apologise for this. If you can still hear us, we've just lost our screen, so we can't see you at all. But you're now back. So that,
We're here. I can see you and hear you.
Okay, so going through our agenda, apologies for absence, please, Kimberly.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Michaela Wicks, Councillor Maxine Gale and Councillor Connor Velling.
Thank you. Item 2, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held back in November. Do I have any comment or a motion to approve that? Please.
Just a comment. No, I approve, but I think we made it last meeting. I think you still have to invoice time council for the election expenses. As far as I'm aware, it's still not been done.
Kimberly, she's all up on that.
Yes.
I'm trying to. I had a couple of myself on there. One was we had an action point that the head of HR would attend one of these meetings to provide the committee additional assurance on staffing risk matters, given the high turnover within Waverley. I think that's still very important. I'd like to emphasise that for the next time. I know if it hasn't yet happened, but I think as we go through the agenda, from certainly a risk perspective, staffing is a higher area. So could we please have that as another action point, certainly for our next meeting, that we do hear really what the processes and controls are for staffing risk. And then the other one on clause 51 of the minutes, we were given various assurances about the council's processes given the investigations with Guildford. And there was a comment that the systems risk was being looked at. So in view of that, I'd be grateful. I'm going to look at Jose. Perhaps you could just address that, updating us when it comes to the fraud risk report. Just where we are in terms of looking at our systems as a result of those investigations. Any other comments on the minutes? No. So I have a motion to approve. Approved. Seconded. Thank you. The minutes are approved. Disclosure of interests.
I've received none prior to the meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Questions by members of the public?
None received.
None received. Questions from members?
None received.
None received. Okay. So we will then move on to item 6, the external audit findings report, where we're being asked to consider and note the report produced by Grant Thornton. I note that Councillor Hyman has registered to speak.
He has, but he hasn't joined us yet.
Okay, so we may wait for that. So if I turn over to Matt or AJ to present the report that you've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take you. So there are two papers we've got on the agenda. We've got our audit findings report and then the auditor's annual report. I will flag that the back of the supplementary seems to be the revised set of accounts, which obviously is the officer's paper rather than ourselves, but I just thought I'd draw that to attention before we leap in. So if I just go through firstly our audit findings report, which is our work on the 22-23 accounts, and I'll use the big pages at the bottom of the pack just to talk you through the page numbers. If I jump to page 3 of the report, sets out a summary, I guess, of where we are at the current point of time, and I guess what we've got left to do. So I think the work has been, I think it's been over a few months since November. We found a few corrected adjustments that are there. There's also some adjusted errors that will go on through the later in the report. As ever with these kind of things, we found some presentational changes which the council has agreed to amend, and we found some recommendations as well for officers to take forward. At this stage, the work is largely complete. There are a small number of outstanding items which are on page 6 of the pack that we just need to work through, and I know progress has been made on some of those this week. We're working through the final reviews by AJ and myself in terms of the quality management, and then we'll need to see the sort of final set of accounts and final SRM management representation as well. So in broad terms, but we're in the final throes. There are a few things we still need to work through, but I think that feels a positive position, I guess, given where things were not that long ago, and hopefully should at least mean the authority is in a pretty strong place ahead of 23-24. If I then jump onto page 4, so our second report will talk more about the value for money work. I think it's just prudent at that stage just to reflect. Obviously, we're aware of the broader investigation that's ongoing. and as a firm, we will need to consider whether there's any impact of that in respect of our work on the value for money conclusion. So we will probably need to watch that, let that run its course before we can conclude. But that doesn't stop me sort of talking through that report later, but I just wanted to flag that at this stage. Just trying to have a look. So page 6 again just briefly summarizes the areas that are outstanding. I say they are the final throws in terms of the testing itself. Obviously there is the reviews that we'll need to work through as part of that quality management, but you know, it feels a strong positive position to work through. I'll very briefly go through the significant risks, the key areas of focus for our audit. So page 8 talks about the 2 standard ICE 240 risks around the revenue cycle and the expenditure cycle. Largely a very positive picture in that front. We found a classification issue on the revenue, but that doesn't impact on the bottom line of the authority. It's just where the numbers are coming from, and equally and no issues on the expenditure side, which is pleasing. Moving on to management override controls. From the work we performed, we found a couple of improvements around the organization's journal processes, which I think are somewhat probably a sign of the times. I think we tend to find these kind of challenges at lots of authorities, particularly with where there are some staffing challenges and those kind of things. So those are things just to tighten the controls moving forward, but we've not found any errors on the back of those weaknesses. We've, as ever, done a suite of work around your investment properties and your land and building. From the investment properties as it stands, it's a clean bill of health. They're correctly recorded within the accounts. We did find a couple of small errors in relation to the land and buildings due to some challenges with the data given to the valuer. But again, those are small enough that the authority has chosen not to amend those, and we're comfortable with that due to the size and scale of those items. Moving on to page 11, brief commentary on the pension fund liability, which is looked after for the council by Surrey County Council and the Surrey Pension Fund. We found no specific issues relating to Waverley's, I guess, share of the fund. There are a couple of issues we've had to report there that we've reported to all Surrey districts, where the auditors of the pension fund found some last minute changes in the value of the level for investments, which is, I guess, having done some of that testing myself at another authority, is part and parcel of those investments. It doesn't have suggest there are any issues with those valuations. It's more of a timing of the information being available, really. So we've just had to report those there, but the impact on the council's share, as documented there, is quite small. Next, we move on to page 12, which obviously summarises the sort of the group audit, because of the 2 charities which are consolidated into the council's accounts. So obviously we're proposing clean bill of health for the council. We did find one adjustment relating to the cash held by the charities and the council that wasn't being correctly netted out in the group accounts. So we're just working through that with the authority in terms of getting the correct amendments put through the account. But again, it doesn't impact the cash held by the group. It's more of a netting off and a presentational issue there. The next few pages talk a bit more about the estimates around valuations and those kind of things, which we've touched on again. Likewise around the net pensions liability. Just trying to jump through to the next thing. So if I jump to page 22, just briefly summarises where we are for the value for money. Again, I'll touch on that in more detail on the second agenda item. Page 24 just sets out the other work that we've done for the authority in terms of those certification of claims, housing benefit grant, and the housing capital receipts return. Those are being finalised as we speak, and we'll provide a further update once those are finished. And then if we jump into the appendices, page 28 starts with the recommendations we've identified from the work performed. I say it does look like it might look like there are quite a few there, but I think a lot of these are things we're finding in a number of places certainly around journals. They're the kind of things that we have to draw to your attention to. There was a minor point around a service auditors report from Midland HR, which we will have reported that all of the authorities that utilise those service organisations. Next, there's the point around income classification, the group reporting point, and the classification of the community infrastructure levy debtors. And then those points we touched on earlier around the property, plant and equipment. So a lot of them we've talked about in previous points in the paper, is just sort of drawing those through as areas for the processes to be strengthened moving forward. Page 31, we can be positive in that we did have this challenge in the previous year around starters and levers. However, we've identified no such issue this year. So that's pleasing. We can resolve that challenge. Page 32 then gives a bit more detail of the actual adjustments to the core financial statements that have taken place this year. So, as I said earlier, there's the adjustment around the classification of income between grants and fees and charges. And there's the split of the community infrastructure levy debtors, which should be between short and long term. So again, it doesn't challenge the overall value of those debtors, more the presentation of those on the balance sheet. Page 33 onwards talks about some of the minor presentational and disclosure issues that were required to report to you. And again, management has opted to correct those in the revised accounts. Page 34 details the unadjusted errors, which you as the committee are asked to approve the management's treatment. In our case, we're comfortable with management's view in each of those areas. The adjustments individually are immaterial and cumulatively are below our materiality threshold. So we're comfortable with management's view on those. I think in most cases, those are numbers that, whilst we'd all like them to be correct, the time and the effort to correct those, and I guess the risk of getting the corrections incorrect probably outweighs the value of those corrections, which is not uncommon when we have things like property, plant and equipment errors, because they impact so many different numbers within the accounts. So we're comfortable with management's approach on those. Page 36 summarises where we are with fees in terms of the scale fee and the adjustments which have been agreed with PSAA. And G is just a letter of representation that management will be providing at the end of our work. So that's there for reference. So that was all I wanted to talk through in terms of the paper. Of course, happy to take questions from members on that one.
Good. Thank you very much, Matt. Members, do you have any questions or matters you would like to raise with Matt following that report? I had one, Matt, and tell me if you're going to refer to it in the next agenda item. Clearly, the comments about value for money and being unable to conclude your report while the investigation is still ongoing. Do you have a sense of the timing that will delay things?
I mean, well, I've had a brief conversation with Richard in terms of broad timings and this was last Monday. So obviously I caveat that with obviously the fact that obviously we've seen one I guess movement in that over the last week or so. I think when I spoke to Richard, he was reasonably prompt that it was sort of a 6 to 8 week process. And then I guess it depends what that finds ultimately. I mean, I think we're working on the basis, that from what we've seen so far, it's clear, it seems to be constrained to, I guess, to Guildford, but I guess we just have to watch this space given, I guess, that broader investigation, which I say we understand and we're aware of. So I guess if that investigation runs its course in that, 6 to 8 week period, then that, we will obviously come back to that at the end of that. And if it comes out that there are no items of note from a Waverley perspective, then we should be able to move that relatively quickly to a close. I guess if something does appear, we'll obviously have to take stock and see where that goes. But in broad terms, that's not too far down the road. I guess in broad terms, it's well in advance of proposed backstop dates and those kind of things. And at the moment, I'm certainly of the view that this shouldn't get caught by those proposals as and when they come into force. But obviously, I guess we just have to see what the investigation identifies.
Okay, thank you for that. And I certainly take some assurance that when you say that from what you've seen so far, there are no red flags coming up.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Councillor Beeman.
What requirements are there for making these available to the public, for public comments or observations? Are there any procedures there
Any procedures for
for public comments or observations?
that? I don't know. Is that?
I mean, like a town council has to advertise its accounts for a period of 6 weeks, and I was wondering if similar applies here.
Have you? Okay.
It's only curiosity, you know.
I don't have the answer to that question.
So the accounts themselves were published on the website
Yeah.
some while ago. That's done on a statutory basis.
Yeah.
It's advertised in the press to say that's available.
Yeah.
And we will also publicise the fact that when we are about to actually close the accounts off and sign them off as well. So that is
Okay.
available.
Okay, so they
Thank you.
are.
They are publicly available on the website, and past accounts are also available.
Thank you. Councillor Davison.
Couple of questions, one for you, Richard, and one for you, Matt, if I may. Matt, you raised that there are some minor non-material adjustments. These will all be put through the accounts too, so that we will not get a reoccurrence going through to next year.
So we have not adjusted them in the 22-23
No.
accounts, but obviously we'll pick up those comments and make sure they're not repeated in future years.
Okay, fine. And the question for you, Matt, is you seem to be very positive. Are we going to conclude within our normal government timescale?
Well, I mean, so I guess to a certain extent, I guess we're kind of beyond that, I guess, because we are here, and I guess in when the deadline was initially set, it was the end of September. I think then sort of were working to an initial revised position at the end of December, which I guess obviously has come and gone. I think at this stage, the key date for the authority will be, I say, the backstop date as and when it is set by government. I say the music we're hearing currently is that would be the end of September. I think we all want to be clear of that well before that that date. I think as it stands, we're in a pretty strong position as it stands. I say there's a few bits that we still need to work through from our perspective with the authority to get that final set of accounts absolutely tied off, but I see no reason why that shouldn't happen in the next few weeks. So then it would just be subject to the broader investigation. But as it stands, I see no risk to the end of September. I think clearly officers will want to be turning their attention to 23, 24, which I think is why there's been a real push over the last few weeks to bring that sort of time frame forward. So as it stands, I guess if we're looking to that ultimate sort of drop dead position, then we should be well clear of that. As it stands, obviously that's subject to that ongoing investigation that we've touched on. But yeah, I think we're all keen that we're sort of there or thereabouts in the next few weeks, to be honest.
Our resources, Richard, are all keen, ready to spring into action to complete this.
Mavis, would you like to comment on that one?
Yes, so Councillor Davidson, I can assure you that the finance team are dedicated and committed to making sure we get this.
We don't have a resource issue there, as we seem to have so widely across our organisation.
No, I think we are fully staffed at the moment. So
Yeah, but Sam.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So from that, do I correctly surmise that we're being asked here to merely consider a note of these findings, and we're looking potentially to the June meeting to formally approve these accounts if everything is in order and by that time? Is that a sort of a correct timetable I should be thinking about? Thank you. There are a couple of points here. I think on page 36, I think Matt alluded to it. It says the committee is required to approve the management's proposed treatment of unadjusted misstatements. And is that something we are expected to do at this meeting, or is that something we do in June when we formally approve them?
It would be helpful to know it if you're not.
Are members here happy with management's proposed treatment of the unadjusted misstatements?
Yeah.
Thank
No
you.
non-material, but
Thank you.
anyway.
And the other, just a technical point on the management letter of representation, which again, I don't think we're formally approving this one, that it finishes saying that the approval of this letter of representation was minuted by the council's audit committee at today's meeting. So clearly that needs to be just adjusted.
Yes.
So are members happy to note this report?
Happy?
Thank you. Consider that noted. Matt and AJ, thank you very much. Much appreciated. So I'll now move on. I don't know whether Councillor Hyman has moved to risk management.
So
The other reports.
I was just going to say, Chair, I just wanted to come in. I want to overlook the value for money report, which was the second item that.
Okay, so that was not that.
No,
agenda item, but yes, please.
Yeah, no, that's of course. So, so again, I'll try to keep it quite brief. So so page 43 of the supplementary agenda is our auditor's annual report. I think this is, the third year of the enhanced National Audit Office code on the value for money conclusion. So we're now required to produce a far more detailed piece of work than we have done in the past. On this, I think if I draw your attention to page 45 of the pack, which is an executive summary of where things are. In terms of our assessment for 2023, we have a couple of ambers and then a green. I would just sort of flag for members sort of awareness that the scoring year on year is effectively based on the number of recommendations. It's a somewhat arbitrary I guess view based, not particularly commenting on the nature of the findings, but more the number of them, which I guess is why the direction of travel shows, as it were. I think page 46 of the pack is the sort of the start of the executive summary, and again, I think I would just caveat that this obviously this is obviously subject to anything that comes out of the ongoing investigation. But we've had a good look around the three areas of criteria, which is the financial sustainability of the council. I think, as we said, there is a bit of a gap over the medium term, but I know the council, from speaking to Richard and Mavis, have got plans in place to address that gap, and I think that gap is considerably smaller than the 5.2 as it stands. I think there is clear evidence from the projections the council does know where it is, and it is doing all it can to manage that gap. And obviously, you'll have seen the most recent budget published and the challenges that the cuts that are being made. I think that's a reflection of the sector as a whole at the moment. So I think from the finance perspective, we're pleased that we haven't got any areas of significant weakness. There are some recommendations we've made around, I guess, strengthening some of that management, which I'll touch on as we go through the report. In terms of governance, we found one recommendation there, which is largely piggybacking on the work that internal audit have done, just some of the strengthening of arrangements around risk management. So it's not, I don't think we're raising anything new. I think it's just that we feel there's a bit more work that needs to be done to be able to close that area off. And then in terms of the 3Es, we've not identified any significant weaknesses there. And I think it's just kind of a bit of a watching brief for us at this stage around how the council is working with Guildford as part of that shared service arrangements and how that continues to develop over the coming years. So that, I guess, is a brief summary. There's a huge amount of narrative there, which I won't go through. I think if I just quickly jump to the improvement recommendations, which start on page 57. So I think there's a little bit around just monitoring and identification of savings, I guess, over the medium term. I think that, to be honest, that's a reflection of, I guess, of where most local authorities are at the moment with the, continued challenges on funding and those kind of things. I think, management have provided a response there in terms of where they are. So I think it's very much one that we're all watching this space at the moment. The next recommendation, I guess, is kind of on that capital side of things as well. I think there's often lots of drifted capital expenditure, which again isn't unique to Waverley. It's something we see more broadly across the piece. And I think there's a bit more around authorities, just I think just being slightly more robust in terms of some of that initial budget setting and management of projects. Obviously, we completely understand that costs of capital programs have drifted immensely in recent years. So it has been a challenge clearly, but I think just making sure that the capital side of things there's not a lot of focus on that side of things. Our further recommendations around sort of consultation exercise with residents. I think I accept that's probably much, depends on where things are and those kind of things. I think it's just something that I think obviously we just encourage authorities to consider as they're sort of, as you're trying to make the best use of the funding you have available, what services do residents most value for their pound. And then finally, I think it was just a little bit around sort of developing a joint workforce strategy with the council. I guess obviously that's been touched on several occasions in the committee. Obviously, workforce clearly is a challenge, and I guess it's just how you, as authority, I guess, make best use of that that potential opportunity. Obviously, notwithstanding, could be some challenges as well. And then I think there was one, the last improvement recommendation was on page 65 of the pack, which I was saying was just a I think a follow on the work that internal audit have done around risk management. It's something that I think we raised in last year's report, and I think it's just that I think you feel obviously there's a little bit way to go before that that recommendation has been fully closed. So that was all I wanted to go through in detail on the report. Of course, more than happy to take any questions from members on anything else I've not covered.
Well, thank you, Matt. Any additional questions for Matt on those? I hear none, so thank you, Matt. I think we'll probably in a moment just address slightly the risk management observations, but thank you very much for that. So I will move to, well, we had the risk management agenda item. Now that has been withdrawn for this meeting, largely for a procedural factor, I think. And Pedro, thank you for coming and attending our meeting tonight. And could I just ask you just to enlarge on why it has been withdrawn? Because I understand it's sort of a temporary signature approval process. But more importantly, you just heard there from some of the concerns that the external auditors have had. And if you review the minutes of this committee, you'll see that for a year now, we have been expressing concern of the speed and direction of the risk management within the council, particularly in terms of things like the risk register. So the paper that was withdrawn, I personally thought was a good development. So I look forward to it coming back. Pedro, could you?
Yes, of course.
Please go on. Thank you.
Well, first of all, councillors, thank you for having me. So, I mean, I'll start with an apology that the reason it was withdrawn was because it was awaiting my signature. So I apologise. I was off last week, so I hadn't appreciated that was waiting on me. So I have signed off. So the paper that you saw will return at the next audit committee. So apologies that that's the case. I think that's just a bit of confusion on our part, so I apologise for that. The sort of fundamental point here, though, is that I mean, I recognise and accept the comments from Matt and colleagues, and I share the committee's determination to get the to make sure that we're doing risk management properly here. Since I have joined the council, I mean, first of all, I'll just say a big thank you to Robin Taylor and his team, who I think have been doing a really good job in terms of kind of keeping a grip on everything. Within CMB, the Corporate Management Board, we had a conversation about what's the right way to make sure that we manage risks appropriately within the council. So we now have a monthly risk and performance meeting. The first of those meetings is tomorrow. At that, we will do two things, and we've put them together this way because I think these are very connected. So firstly, we will go through the corporate risk register for both Guildford and Waverley. I expect that within that conversation, we ought to be having a serious conversation about whether we've captured all the right corporate risks within both, and also taking into account lots of these comments about where there are risks, have we got named officers, are we clear about what the sort of mitigation measures are, what's the timeline for each of those, is there sufficient kind of resource and attention and so on. And that is a conversation that we will have monthly. Linked to that, and I think this is really important, so actually that conversation is not just limited to the risks that are on that corporate risk register, because I think we always should be asking ourselves, have we captured the right things here? You cannot run an organisation if you're not clear and don't have that clear line of sight to what the key risks are, both now and what the key risks are that we anticipate coming up in the future. And both of those are things we need to keep an eye on. Related to that is the Waverley's performance. So we will have the second part of that conversation, that meeting will focus on performance. And the reason that's important is because that might highlight other areas of risk that we may not have captured within the sort of risk register. And we do need to differentiate between different types of risks. There's a difference between a sort of corporate and strategic risk to a kind of service level risk, but often the former can manifest as the latter. So it's really important that we I think that holistic conversation and having that conversation in one place is really important. So that is the sort of, I guess, the start of how we want to kind of have that conversation, at least at the sort of corporate strategic level. Yeah, I look forward to, I think it's going to take a couple of meetings to get that in the right place, but I look forward to having, I would foresee us having a regular conversation here with this committee, because we ought to have a sort of a shared view of what those key corporate risks are, and we ought to be taking the committee's advice on whether we're focused on the right place.
Indeed, thank you for those comments and observations. I will just open it up to other members for any observations that you have from Pedro's words. Councillor Davison.
If no one else wants to speak. Again, rather like with our chair, disappointed that we weren't able to pick this up, but I hear your explanation, and it is reassuring to hear that the Collaboration Management Board is looking at risks, and particularly that it's trying to look at providing a cohesive approach across both the entities. Now, you're planning to do that relatively soon, I gather. I would like, Chair, if my colleagues on the committee are also with me, to get a informal discussion with the CMB members ahead of the us having it formally looked at by the committee, because I'm sure it'll be quite a lengthy debate, and partly because we will need to understand where you guys on the CMB have been coming from.
Yes.
I really do feel that it would be helpful if, dare I say, yet another meeting that we do convene outside our normal schedule to look at this and discuss it freely with the CMB members. And when the next question is, when do you think this is likely to be, Pedro?
Well, first of all, I'd very much welcome, I think, kind of having an informal conversation first, so that we're all kind of on the same page, I think would be really helpful. I think we're probably a couple of months at least away from that, just because, as I say, our first meeting's tomorrow. I expect what's probably going to happen there is we're going to have a debate about whether the right things are on there and whether the sort of the basic structures are in the right place. It's then the next conversation that's going to be the one of appropriate of real value, and then at that point that's probably where we're ready to have an initial conversation with you, if that's okay. So we're probably looking towards, what would that be, sort of June, July?
Well, the next meeting, this committee is June.
It is June. I'm just looking. I'm
But
every time to scroll through my.
So perhaps
That's been-
early June.
The last meeting was cancelled, so we've done it.
17th of June is the next one.
Is that too early to have the conversation?
It would be nice to have this informal meeting before that.
Okay.
Maybe if we looked
that's-
at the week
that's-
before.
Yeah, the week before that would be, so early June.
Early
We
June,
should be
yeah, early June sounds
getting there
good.
by then. Yeah.
You also just advised that
Late May.
you signed off the framework document. I think it would be helpful if that was circulated now, if it can be 2 members, the report that we would have considered tonight, so that members have a chance to read that, which will form as much the backdrop to the informal meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Chairman, I always have a concern that we might be driving something towards a timetable rather than the outcome we want to see from it. And I just get the feeling from what Pedro just told us that we're actually pushing him to do something faster than is possible to get a meaningful outcome for us to consider. Because we don't want to just be talking around it. We want to have something positive to look at. So I'm not convinced that that's the right way to go. I think we should do it when we have a meaningful report for us to look at or a conversation to have, and then we can move forward. Otherwise, we're just doing something to a timetable. And is the timetable necessary? That's
Why don't we do a, why don't we, sorry, Chair, is that all right?
Please go ahead.
I was going to say, look, why don't we commit to doing an informal conversation? Because I think that's a thing that we can do, you know, comfortably. At that point, we can talk about how, you know, where we are on this, how we're kind of, how we're setting up those risk conversations and how close we are to kind of having that kind of meaningful conversation. We know that we're going to have the risk management framework on the agenda for June the 17th, so we've got that anyway, and to some extent this helps to flesh that out. If we feel like we're ready for a more formal conversation, then we can do that too. And this way we hedge our bets.
That would satisfy you, Councillor?
Yes.
I hear what you're saying, but equally I'm concerned that, you know, we sat here this time last year and in June and we're still waiting. So I think there is a need to put a little bit of pressure on management.
well, there you have the advantage of me. This I'm not sure that I was.
Indeed, but that certainly I think is a good plan. And you know, firstly, I'd like to say thank you for hearing from you that the tone from the top and the sense of direction is, I think, gives the committee a good deal of assurance. So thank you. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. Let's now move on to item 8, which is the annual governance statement for, it says, for 23-24. Now, if I recall, we were being asked to approve that. Maybe would you like us to take us through that, and also could you please clarify whether we are here expected to actually approve that, or whether this is a noting of that report which will then get approved at another meeting.
Okay, Chairman. So within the statement of accounts, which is at the back of the pack with the 2 external audit reports, that has got the 22-23 annual governance statement within it. So that is something you've seen on numerous occasions. So if we can get that one signed off, then that puts that one to bed as part of the 22-23 accounts. Paper 8 tonight is the updated annual governance statement for 23-24 financial year, which you saw a draft of back in November and commented upon. So those comments have been incorporated together with any updates that we've actually made ourselves over the last few months. So this is now something which will form part of the draft accounts for 23-24, obviously will then be published as a draft statement of accounts. That will obviously then be subject to the audit and will be actually signed off as part of those accounts, hopefully in sort of October time this year. So for now, it's basically any further comments on this as a draft to go into the draft accounts for 23-24.
Okay, can I, before we open it up, just clarify that? Do you think that the 22-23 AGS was in the back of the, or is in the back of the statement? The statements.
Yes.
Is there, is it?
Sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't immediately see that. It was there, it said to me that in the draft
Oh, it
we
says
had
to follow.
So it's not.
Okay, we'll have to step down. Apologies, Chairman.
So I appreciate we need to formally approve that. So I'll put it to members. I think we've got three options. I think one, that document needs to be circulated. We have previously considered it back in June and September last year. So it's very much, and it's already published as draft on the website, but we need to formally approve it. So I think three options. So either just have it circulated to members now, and if members felt appropriate, delegate to me as chair the ability to approve it. We can, of course, approve it more formally in June at our next meeting, or thirdly, we could have a special meeting to approve it. I'll open it up to members for observations. So we're talking, this is the 22-23 AGS.
I'd like to delegate to you in conjunction with the vice chair.
Well, my advice is that the committee had considered it a number of times last year. It's been published as a draft. I think it probably would have been here had we done it appropriately. So I would propose that it's circulated to members. Members given an opportunity to comment, and if members are then happy with it, then I can approve it. Does that sound agreeable?
Yes.
Chairman, I propose that it is delegated to the chair to approve after comments from members of the committee.
I should be saying that.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. So what we have before us then is the AGS draft for consideration and comment for the current year. And just to again clarify something that was made by someone, there are two versions here that look very similar. The difference is one is the previous version that we looked at. If you look at the version control, you'll see the changes in the first one, the changes that have been made. So one version, the old version, has Tom Horwood as a signature, and I think Pedro's signature space is on as it should be. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we have updated it for things like the investigation, those bits and pieces. That's included in there as well as a governance issue.
So did members have any comments for consideration on that AGS?
This is on the 23-24.
23-24 version, yes. I had one I'd just like to read on 5.4, which is on page 14.
Page 22. No. Sorry. Yeah, page 22.
Where we talk about the other governance issues. This is draft. I'd rather felt that the what we have here perhaps was a little light in terms of what the government's issues to do with Guildford are. Didn't we say a number of government issues? I think we should perhaps be a little more clearer as to what some of those are. After all, that many of them are in the public domain. I think it would be appropriate to just review how we write that when it comes to the AGS.
Yes, happy to take that on board, Chairman.
With the other observation I had, item 6, page 10, the work plan, we do have the March, the value March meeting. It says value report, money report, which I think has been postponed, has it not?
That was the second external audit report.
Okay, sorry, that's that. Okay, tick that. But it doesn't mention the fraud investigation summary that's now on here. I think that needs to be there. All those. Page 13, at the top, is 10, referencing that the internal audit plant manager had left, that Southern internal audit now doing it, incorporating internal audit except for counter fraud. I think a comment as to who is now responsible for the fraud investigation and supervision is needed there. Hopefully the comments on 11 from about Grant Thornton and the completion of the audit will be appropriate when we approve it. And we're now not approving it, so I was looking at item 13, which hopefully will be valid at the time we approve it. So I'd say that's Councillor Davidson.
I'll keep it down, don't you? I'd like to review the document in more detail later on. Arrived rather late. I didn't have the time to give the attention which I really needed. But one thing which struck me, looking at significant operational events, is I think we need to highlight, and a possible risk area for us is the level of staffing and staffing difficulties which we are experiencing. Admittedly, other councils are in similar positions, but let's look at us in isolation first. But I may have some further comments to add, but I think we need to identify that as a significant risk area for us.
Yes, happy to take that on board, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Any no other comments? I think if members have further comments, if they can pass them on to you. So we will.
Are you? May I just, Richard? Are you the owner of this, or?
Well, Mavis has been leading the review of it. But, yeah.
Copy Mavis and copy you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We then move to, I think we then had the item for the consideration of the 2024-25 AGS. I believe that, is that a,
That was if we had our TARDIS available, but we haven't, so we can't.
okay, so we
No, unfortunately, members, it was an administrative error, in that we got carried away with ourselves and put 24-25, even though we haven't even started 24-25. So please just ignore that last little bit.
I mean, the AGS is a living document, but it's good to only have 1 year that is living at the same time.
This one hasn't been born.
No.
Nearly though.
Nearly. Thank you. So I will move on to item 10, the internal audit charter, which we are being asked to consider and approve. And Iona, I think you've been very patiently waiting there. Would you like to take us through the charter?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Can I just confirm that you can all hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
Perfect. Conscious you've already been going for an hour, so I'll just take you through the salient points of the internal audit charter. As you have rightly just pointed out, Chair, it's a document for you as a committee to approve. It's a document that comes in front of this committee annually each year in support of the internal audit plan. And it's a document that is required to be produced in line with the public sector internal audit standards. The document as such will cover just about the same headings that you have already seen in previous charters. But in terms of the content within each of those sections, it is quite significantly different to the document that you have had in previous years. And this is reflective of the arrangement, certainly for 24-25, that the council has engaged with ourselves to provide the full internal audit coverage for Waverley during the course of the 24-25 year. As you'll recall, previously, Waverley had retained an incumbent internal audit manager who took on the reporting and monitoring side of the internal audit work, as well as provided some direct internal audit coverage. All of that work will now be done by ourselves. Obviously, the exception within the audit charter, which I'll come on to, is that we're not providing any of your counter fraud arrangements. You've still retained that internal resource for that, and I think as a committee you've already identified on the AGS that it needs to know where that role is now reporting to. Some of the key changes, just to highlight section wise, we've got mission and core principles in there in line with the IPPF. So again, the international standards. There's more information on authority, purpose and responsibility. And it just points out through the document that the council's retained responsibility for the functions of the sort of fraud investigation and any counter fraud work. All that said, and I don't think there's much more for me to draw out for you as a committee. As I say, the document in principle just outlines the differences for you now in the provision of the internal audit coverage for 24-25. And I'm happy to take and potentially try and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Iona. Members, any questions for Iona? Councillor Davidson.
I may have lost it in the charter document itself. Could you just take us through to whom you report and what is the control on what your activities are apart from us?
Okay, so in terms of So we kind of report dually. We'll report to you as an audit committee. We also report through to corporate management board. In terms of the conduct of the work and the scoping, that's all derived from the internal audit plan. Again, the charter sets out how we do the internal audit plan, and the plan document that's coming to you in a minute that I'll talk you through also outlines how we go through the planning stage. We do that. We do some of that independently for the planning in the sense of previous audit coverage, what's coming up in the sector, any general risk awareness. We also meet with all, as part of the planning process, all the joint executive heads and the joint strategic directors, because we do want input. It's a collaborative process, and between all sides, we'll come up with what we feel is the best assurance and added value plan for the council. We take that through CMB. The current standards require that the plan as such needs to be approved by both the senior management team, so that's your joint corporate management board, as well as the committee charged with governance, which is yourselves as audit and risk.
If I may, Chair, I feel slightly uncomfortable with that. I think that the internal audit should be for this organisation, determined by this organisation, and not the CMB. I find it uncomfortable that we're having to share that through a group which is not Waverley orientated.
Okay, but your CMB is responsible for Waverley. I'm not quite sure where else I could take it for senior management.
CMB is both Waverley and Guildford, as I understand it.
Yes, but it's the corporate management board. So
yes, but it is looking at two organisations. It's straddling. It's not looking at specifically our organisation and our internal controls and issues. And I think that should come completely separately from the CMB.
I mean,
that's my view, but others may have different.
So the internal audit plan, it is basically the internal audit plan for Waverley Borough Council. So it is only for Waverley Borough Council.
And agreed by?
And agreed. Well, it's agreed basically by your good selves in a few minutes. That's the next paper we're coming on to. So that basically is the plan for Waverley Borough Council for the next year. I am also your representative in terms of the liaison point with internal audit, you know, if there are key issues. Yes, I'm a joint person, but I've had those discussions will be either for Waverley or for Guildford, not for both. So there is a separation between the two, but your internal audit plan is your own.
So the funding for Iona and the organisation is, we pay for the bit which we do for ourselves, completely independently, and we can control that, and we control the activities which we want to have audited.
Absolutely, it's a completely separate contract to the Guildford one.
That reassures me.
I think Richard's covered it. But sorry, it is just worth being really clear though that all your senior officers are paid by both councils. That doesn't mean that we can only ever take both councils' perspectives. And in fact, you know, the essence of forming that is that there are two sovereign councils served by the same senior officers. So just as Richard will be the representative looking at this from a Waverley perspective, the people he's talking to from a Waverley perspective are the other senior officers like myself and Susan Sale and Dawn Hudd, etc. We will look at the Waverley plan purely as a Waverley perspective, and then as a separate conversation, we would look at a Guildford plan, but they are not the same conversation, and we're not, you know, these are sovereign issues.
That reassures me. I'm concerned that if it reports to the CMB, as opposed to the finance director, I feel uncomfortable again with reporting to a board. I prefer to have a single person to which a third party reports to.
That's Richard.
Councillor Davis, I think I take your point, but in the paper, it was, I think it's a little confusing when it says the chief internal auditor to report functionally to the board. That board is actually this committee, not the CMB.
Oh,
So-
okay. Well, I'm confused about the
word
number of
board is
washing boards we've got.
used differently. But your point is a very well made one. My supplemental to that is the chief internal auditor in the paper is described as the assistant head of SIAP. Is that you, Iona? And
It is, yes.
And are you also the chief internal auditor for Guildford? Because that
I am.
Now, so that I don't know. That gives me some concerns as to how you can have both hats on.
I mean, it's not unusual to run. I mean, I also have a number of other clients. So, you know, as a senior management representative for SIAP, we each individually run a number of portfolios. So I'm not quite sure where I see that I'm understanding what your concerns are, but I'm also chief internal auditor for Guildford. Again, as Richard pointed out, they're separate contracts.
They are. Just I suppose I'm exploring that issue myself as I talk. But I suppose the concern would be, you know, if with your Waverley hat on, you were to find something in an audit report that impacted heavily on Guildford, or vice versa. You know, is it clear which hat you would be wearing at that time?
So yes, so it is certainly very clear for me which hat I'm wearing. I think Richard could probably attest to that, having seen particularly the two recent progress reports across both councils that are very different in what they are reporting on. There's also I'm trying to think what the phrase is. It's getting so late. There's also economies of efficiency with having the one chief internal auditor across two. You're going to work towards greater collaboration, greater alignment. So it's any learning that can be taken from one audit into another. We take that learning across all of our partners, obviously anonymously. So yeah, I'm not quite sure now where I'm going on that, other than, yes, I'm quite sure of where the demarcation between the two are.
Okay, thank you, Iona. I've got Councillor Reid, do you?
Yeah.
Well, I was only going to say, Chairman, that having worked as a consultant in a former life, I see no issue at all in working across several clients.
Indeed, yeah.
I was going to make a similar point, but just to add that actually having auditors with experience of more than one places, I would say, is immensely preferable, because it's good to have a sense of kind of best practice and otherwise, and I consider that to be a huge asset for all the reasons that Iona set out. I would just like to reassure the committee as well that kind of, you know, as part of as part of the way in which we operate as an officer cadre, being really clear where there are sovereign demarcations is critical. We have to be able to do that, or else we won't be able to operate. So I do just want to reassure the committee that those practices are absolutely in place.
Okay, thank you. That gives me some comfort. Councillor Bean.
I think I asked a stupid question here, but what's the difference between key stakeholder partner, which you've just shown in Annex 1, and an external client, which really should also shown in Annex 1? What's the difference?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
Sorry, I'm just saying, I may be being a bit thick here, but I said in Annex 1 of your charter, show Guildford Borough Council as a key stakeholder partner and Waverley Borough Council as an external client. What's the difference?
It's on page,
On page
21.
15,
Page 15.
Right, so the key stakeholders sit on the board of the partnership. And the external clients are just contracted provisions.
Okay.
So it's a historic, those were the original sort of founding members, I guess.
Yes, a lot of them were. So yeah.
Does that?
Yes, well, yeah, I suppose so.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Does it make any difference for audit purposes? It doesn't, does it? No.
In fact, references.
Well, thank you. Now, members, are we happy then, having heard those assurances, to approve the audit chart? Agree. Thank you, Iona.
Thank you. And the only other thing I would just come back to in terms of sitting with two hats on is, of course, all of these documents are all in the public domain anyway across all councils, the plans, the charters and the progress reports.
Indeed. Thank you. We shall move on then to, and I think we're staying with you, Iona, to the draft internal audit plan for 24-25, where we have the recommendation that the committee approves that content.
Okay, thank you. So the plan is over pages 17 and 26 in your pack. It's the first audit plan that's been produced on your behalf by Southern Internal Audit Partnership. Obviously, as we've alluded to, prior years was always produced by your incumbent internal audit manager. We've taken the opportunity to have a good old root and branch review of the plan, and there's quite a bit of substantial realignment within the plan. There's been sort of a light touch coverage previously on some of your key financial systems, some of your core corporate governance, risk management, control systems. There's a need to start getting those back into your plan. So we've taken the opportunity to, as I say, have a good old root and branch review and get some of those big systems back into your plan with the focus of the cuts, a good coverage of those through 24-25. So in drawing up the plan, and again, sorry, I should say, as a document, it's in its format is very, very similar to what you've seen before. The introduction, the setting out who the internal audit team are. Obviously, that's changed this year because it's SIAP in its entirety. Setting out how we conform with standards, conflicts of interests. We've also taken into account the key corporate priorities for Waverley as a council. And in amongst doing all of that, if you see on page 21 to 22, we talk about all the other influences that we've taken into consideration in drawing up the plan. So we've looked at our own audit assessment of risk. We've taken into account previous audit coverage, general risk awareness. We've met with all executive heads and joint directors to garner all their thoughts and considerations to take into consideration and map within the internal audit plan. We indicatively in the background have a 3-year plan, but as you can imagine, the pace of change for all councils is such that we only commit and bring to you what we forecast that we'd like to cover and get round within the next 12 months. There's been talk already this evening about the weaknesses and the absence of key strategic risk management documents for Waverley. And we've just made reference to that within this plan to say that actually with everything we've been able to consider, there is the absence of any key corporate strategic risks in drawing up this plan. But hopefully, if it's ourselves doing a similar exercise for you next year, we'll be able to draw on key strategic risks to bring into consideration for the plan. As always, it is a plan. It is more than likely that it will change during the course of the year. And any key changes that are taken on the plan, whether that's systems being moved out to make way for other systems coming in, that will be reported to you as a committee through the regular progress reports that come to you throughout the course of the year. And then through pages 22 through to 24, we're just outlining at a high level those systems that we are proposing to cover during the course of the year, with a very early indication of what the indicative scope will be based around for those reviews. That the scope for each and every review will be refined when we get into doing the actual detailed scoping meetings with the key contacts for each of the audits that we are going to be looking at.
Thank you, Iona. Do any members have any questions or on that plan? I'm looking at Councillor Reid.
Chairman, could I test my understanding within the report on pages 22 to 24, where the proposed timing mentions a quarter? Does that mean the investigation will take place? And I'll take car parks and enforcement, the very last item on page 24. It's saying that proposed timing is Q4. Does that mean that an investigation will take place, or we will review that activity during Q4 24-25?
Okay, yeah. So thank you for that. Chair did ask me to be a bit more descriptive on the quarters. It's just to say these quarters are based on financial year. So, for example, taking your example, car parks and enforcement, we're scheduled at this stage the timing that through Q4, which will be January to March 2025, we will do the review of car parks. So the quarters are based on the financial year, Q1 being April to June, then July to September, October to December, January to March.
Does that mean then that as a committee, we can expect to hear your report the quarter after these dates or at that quarter? So taking the car parking, would you be reporting that in the March 25 meeting or the June 25 meeting, assuming it all goes to plan?
I think it would be so. Again, unless we got it kicked off right at the beginning of January, it's unlikely that you would have it in March. So it's more likely that the Q4 audits, for example, will be wrapped up within the annual opinion report, which will come in June.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Is this committee allowed to make any recommendations on the timing of that? And I think
I believe
Chief Executive will understand why I'm asking that question. Because I just think that the car parking enforcement arrangements probably needs looking at much sooner than Q4 25. I'll just say that, but I don't know how much I should be saying, but I think people understand.
I think you said that this report, the timings of these reports do change over time, so I'd hope management pay heed to what members are saying.
Okay. I'm inclined to support that particular view. It's an issue which I've raised, Chair, with elsewhere, that we seem to have lost. We are losing, to my mind, a considerable amount of income from car parking charges because of lack of enforcement. And I think that's something which we should look at. And an internal audit as to the processes which we have and the monies which we are spending on this could well have a good review.
Do members have a quarter date that they would like to have that in, or when officers would?
Tomorrow.
My opinion is ASAP, but you know, resources have to be considered. But I suspect there's an issue that needs to be addressed.
So could we, therefore, if members are happy to approve this, approve it with the condition or caveat that officers and auditors look at that proposed timing of car parks and enforcement and bring that forward to as soon as possible?
Yeah, that would be good.
Councillor Debs.
And another issue, if I may, IT, disaster recovery planning. That is only one aspect of business continuity. I'm concerned that I don't think we've actually had a business continuity test since I've been a councillor here. That's 4 years now. In fact, I gather that their business continuity committee hasn't sat or doesn't exist. I think this is something which I would like to see looked at, and what the implications are as part of broadening out the aspect of disaster recovery planning. It's more important. The IT side is just one aspect. Getting that right it links into what the people will have to do, and I think it would be worthwhile us looking at our preparedness for such an event.
It's obviously working very well because we haven't had.
I know.
So I was going to say, if I may, if I could come in, and I'll have to quickly look up and double check. I think business continuity does feature within the plan. It's not in for this year. I think it might be in for next year, but hopefully to give members some reassurance. The reason it's not top of the list of priorities is the council does engage the services of an external consultant to assist with all the business continuity and emergency planning arrangements.
I think it's a bit more than just that.
If I may observe, I think you should probably take heed of where members are the feeling here, that the business continuity in its broadest forms needs to be looked at, perhaps sometime before 2 years' time. And Councillor Davidson, I think is quite right. If this business continuity committee that management has is not sitting, that would be a concern for me. And the thing is that you don't know when it's going to happen. So you need to have your plans in place. And as Councillor Davidson said, a tabletop exercise, those sorts of things. And I think as a committee, we would like to have greater assurance that those are being done. Councillor Reid, did you?
No, I said I agree. You have that.
So I think if we can have, as well as bringing forward the car parking, to accelerate the planning for a broader and more comprehensive business continuity review. So not hearing any other things, I think with Councillor Bean.
Just a general question. How long are we tied into the Southern Internal Audit group for internal audit? Have we signed a contract with them or?
With SIAP, they were already.
At the moment, it's an annual contract. Obviously, we did it partway through last year.
Yes.
Just as a sort of test of water. Obviously, we've renewed that again for this year. And I did say to the chairman, we would review partly through this year in terms of whether we want to go into a longer term arrangement. So,
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. So can I have a motion to approve this plan with those two amendments?
Happy to propose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Iona. And we're staying with you for the progress report on the current year's plan.
That's right. Oh, so this is from page 27 on within your pack. Again, you are used to seeing a progress report. So the format is primarily what you're used to as a committee. Obviously, it's the first time it's been produced for the committee directly by ourselves. It's progress up to the end of January 2024 against the plan as agreed and subsequently revised during the course of the year for 2023-24. So again, particularly sections 1, 2 and 3, which are pages 28 to 29, are very, very similar to what you have previously seen. In terms of section 3, the performance dashboard on page 30, the box on the left-hand side on delivery of the audit plan. Completion at this stage of the year is lower than expected, is lower than I would have liked, and we'll come on to some of the key points affecting that statistic later on in the report. Section 4 is the on page 31 is the analysis of what we call live audit reports. So that's any audit report that has previously been issued where there remain outstanding management actions to be implemented. Now that might be because the target date for the action has not yet reached its implementation, so it hasn't been followed up, or it might be where the target date has been exceeded and the management action is yet to be implemented. Very pleasing that actually there's only 3 current management actions across a wide range of reports that are overdue. 1 for cyber security, 1 for housing use and occupation accounts, and 1 for the Memorial Hall. And they are just, they're all in the medium priority, and they're just summarised in Appendix 2 later on in the document, which just gives us an update as to when the revised target date for implementation is. Very, very pleasing to report there are no overdue high priority actions. Nothing shown at the moment for 23-24. That's a combination of where we have been able to issue a final report, or any of those that have management actions, they have been completed. But we do have a number of audit reports that are at draft report stage awaiting management responses, which I'll come on to in a minute. But suffice to say, for section 4, an analysis of live audit reports, that is a very good position to be in at this stage of the year. Section 5 of the report, which is on page 32 of your pack. This is a slightly different, I'm saying slightly different. This is a new section for you in the progress report, and this is where we list out in a little bit more detail for you as an audit committee, rather than you having to wait for the annual audit report, where we list out any areas that we've covered that have resulted in either a limited or a no assurance opinion being given on that audit review. And since your last progress report, which I think came to committee in November, there has been one audit issued, one audit report finalised that had a limited assurance opinion, and that is on the work undertaken on Property Terrier. The Property Terrier is your register of all land and building holdings that you have as a council. So a limited assurance opinion arose through that. The key observations are summarised for you across pages 32 and 33. There were a total, if I get my maths right, 9 to 18 management actions identified for corrective action to address the issues raised in the report, 9 of which were judged by management to be of high priority, 7 medium and 2 low. Then we move on to page 34, and in particular section 7, which is the rolling work programme. Again, very much a format that you are used to seeing as a committee. Some key points to draw out for you on here. Preloaded purchase cards. That's an audit that we have been progressing since Q1. That's been significantly delayed as we are still waiting. So we got to draft report stage. There were some comments on the work that we'd done. It was apparent that we had misunderstood a part of the control framework, which is the whole point of having a clause of audit and a draft report to iron out these discrepancies. It was identified that we needed to do some additional testing with one particular area that was using preloaded purchase cards, and we have been trying to complete that work since July. It has been escalated since July, and I've just had a response now from Mavis, who has got on top of this for us. And she's saying that she'll be able to provide us with the additional information on that next week. So I'm hopeful that we can then get that report over the line. Accounts receivable, sundry debtors. Again, that's been in limbo with the council since about November, December time. Draft report was issued and we're just waiting the management response to that. And again, Mavis has just come back to me today to say that hopefully we'll have that management response by next week. The next one to draw your attention to, but I've got a positive update for you on that now, is the under corporate systems, the second one there, the payment process for repairs and maintenance. Again, that was an audit that was started very early in 23-24. I think it was a Q1 audit, and that has been significantly delayed due to lack of client engagement. I did escalate that finally through to Annie Wrighton in late January. That has now progressed, and the draft report was issued about 10 days ago on that. And then if I take you further down to the last section, governance and cross-cutting reviews, another audit that's been out in draft since July. And I think, Richard, you might have an update for committee on this, I'm told. We've been waiting management responses from that for that draft report since early September. Before I hand over to Richard, I'll just conclude on this part of the report. Annual governance statement, obviously for this committee. This evening, you've seen the draft annual governance statement for 23-24. We had added this as an audit into the internal audit plan for 23-24, because again, looking back historically, there had been no audit coverage of the annual governance statement. It is a very important document for you as a council. So we felt that it needed to go into your audit plan for 23-24, the intention being to audit that through Q1, because it was obviously of the right time for that draft statement to come to you as a committee. We have had considerable difficulties through December and the first 2/3 really of Q4 in being able to identify who the key contacts are. I don't know whether that's been a communication issue at the council, because obviously work on that statement was ongoing. So what I proposed, and again, following your comments on the plan, we'll need to make some adjustments. So I shall book with yourself, Richard, a catch-up meeting as soon as we can after Easter, to have a look at the plan and see what adjustments we can make to bring in the annual governance statement for Q1 and 24/5. Have a look at bringing forward car parks and revisiting when we think we can get business continuity in the plan. And then section 8 again is a section that you will be used to seeing, and that's just the adjustments to the plan that have been made over the course of the year. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have on that, and just probably firstly over to Richard for an update on procurement.
Yeah.
Yes, Richard, could you address procurement, but also I think maybe other members would share some concerns from what Iona said about some of the delays in management responses that we've had. I kind of really look to you for the sort of assurance that these audit reports and their findings are being treated very seriously by management and not being sat on, because some of these dates from July and September, I don't think that's acceptable.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So I think there's a number of issues at play here. So particularly on procurement, Waverley used to have a procurement manager, but they left back, I think around the time this report was actually issued. Now, the collaboration has picked up some of the procurement work for Waverley, but actually you are currently operating two completely different systems, whereby here it is very much self-service, and in Guildford it is a very different model, much more rigorously controlled. Now, our manager at Guildford has also departed. We're in the process of recruiting them at the moment. So the plan of attack is there's a review of the scheme of delegations about to happen that Susan Sale is leading on. That will help set us in terms of the actual sort of procurement and things going forwards. From that, we will update the contract procedure rules and try and align it as best we can, those between the two councils. So if we are going to have a joint service, then operating on two different systems actually really doesn't work. And from that, basically, we're also then going to roll out some proper contract management, which fits into one of the other reports that are built into this year's audit plan around contract management as well. So it hasn't been addressed for a whole number of reasons, but actually, when these reviews and I intend to engage with internal audit whilst we review those things and help get their help basically in terms of actually bringing these things together. So at the moment, at Guildford, we are reviewing things like the fraud policy. And again, I know that we've bounced some of these things off of internal audit to make sure that actually that they're happy with what it is we're doing. We should do exactly the same with the procurement things as well. In some of the wider bits and pieces, so the annual governance statement, I think Rosie was leading on that. I think in those last few months, basically when she was leading up to her departure, I think she was just completely inundated. And that's probably the reason why those things weren't taken forward. It's not that the work wasn't being done, and you've obviously cited that 3 times now in terms of that development of that. So obviously with Mavis here now, then she will engage with Iona over that in the forthcoming months. And I think in terms of there was one on the prepaid procurement cards, where actually I think there was some misunderstanding at the outset. So I think although the main payment cards were audited early on, there was a specific subset of them that dealt with refugees. And I think that's probably where the outstanding questions were. So I think 90% of it was resolved. It was just a small element that wasn't. So just give me some reassurance.
Thank you. Members, any observations, comments? Councillor Vigil.
Comment, I mean, I'm not gonna lie when you say about, you know, one of the reasons why the problems is because if you do it one way, we do it another way. We mainly contract out activities. Yeah, we probably, I mean, what is the most cost efficient for the borough really, and for Waverley in particular? Because Waverley is a very different borough in nature to Guildford. And considering if we're not going down the path necessarily. I mean, maybe all that, but not necessarily. You know, two different systems, but two different boroughs. I mean, like Hong Kong and China, isn't it really?
I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer in terms of, you know, in-house services or outsourcing. I think that's basically down to partly politics, but also partly down to some local decisions that were made in the past. What I want to do, so at the moment you have basically 4 thresholds within your procurement limits. So at the moment that they are very different between the 2 councils. So for me, aligning those so that actually those lower level things can be done by the managers. So the managers can get their 3 quotes or whatever it is they need to do and get on and do those procurement things themselves. And for those rules to be the same across both councils, to me seems the sensible way forwards. Above that, where you do need to go to contract, either provide things at yourself or go out to test the market or whatever, that is where I think the joint team comes in, where the expertise at Guildford actually will serve both councils. But for me, so there's a 2-stage approach here. One will be empower the managers to do the things they can do themselves. Then above that limit, actually, best value for money will be driven by a proper procurement activity.
Yeah, I think at this stage, I'm just making a general point that, you know, generally in the past, for big, I mean, like, for example, refuse collection, for example. I mean, thinking, what? I'm certainly when that went out to 10 last time, there was a bid by Guildford, and it was certainly more expensive than the Bedford bid. But yeah, again, it's what you get for your money at the end of the day. Okay, fair enough. I just want to just put that marker down, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid, Denison, any additional comments?
I mean, from my experience, if we can bring together the processes, if we've got joint teams working on these, working across both councils, it's going to make it much easier to have similar processes. And really, we need to pick and choose the best processes from the 2 organisations. So I'm sure that we can learn something from Guildford and they can learn from us. So, or maybe even another third party.
I completely agree, Councillor Reid. So our financial procedurals and things at Guildford at the moment we are re-looking at, and our starting point has been to actually use Waverley's as a starting point. There are bits within that also need to be updated at Waverley, so actually we will then go back and do the same thing. So, and Joe and Mavis work closely together to actually talk about these things. So it's standardising these things where we can makes absolute sense.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I just had one question here. It was on item 5, the property terrier report, which is the limited one. What I'm not seeing in your summary is a sense of the management response. I think you said that in your verbal comments that the way management had responded. I think that would be a useful thing to have in this report when something's limited. You set out the issues. I'd like to have a clear idea of how management has responded. Not hearing any other questions from that. I think we're looking for a recommendation, basically. Any actions that we want to take from that. I don't think we're being asked to approve this as such. It's more to note it. Is that correct? So we're happy to note that report. Thank you, Iona.
Super. And if I may, Chair, just one last thing from me, and that's it. If I could just come back to you, Richard, on procurement, and I understand what you're saying about the need to have a look, but to enable us to get this report finalised, if you could respond in kind as your management response
Yeah,
as to what those actions are, and then we can get the report finalised.
I will do that myself. Yes.
That would be lovely. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Iona. So we'll move on to Jose. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? For the fraud investigation summary.
Evening all. So this fraud investigation summary is focuses on the housing fraud. So for this financial year to date, we've got 3 properties back at a value of £78,300 each. So in total, we're sitting at 234,900 as far as savings go. This the value per property is set by the National Fraud Initiative, and they reduced the value this year. It used to be £93,000, so they've brought that down to £78,000 per property. So these figures are down from previous years. There's been a few contributing factors, but I think the biggest one has been resource and capacity. It's just a lot of work for one person, and as you know, the internal audit manager, who I used to fall under, recently left, which has left me with all the admin for that too. So, and another problem is, well, not another problem, another issue is being the complexity of the cases that we're getting this year. That's not something we can really manage. The cases coming in have been there's been several complex cases that we are working on at the moment. And then other than that, we have several cases with legal that are going through the legal process at the moment. And that we just wait on the whole process to go through. And that's it.
Thank you. Members, any comments, observations for Jose?
The only comment I would make is that I find that in the recommendation the word notes success. Success seems an odd word to use to me. I would say notes this fraud investigation activity.
I would tend to agree with Councillor Beeman on that. I think in the past we have just noted the results of the activity. That's not to be perceived as a reflection on your work, Jose. It's just that I think the word success is relative and depends on which angle you're looking at things. So yeah, I'm happy to amend that to that we note the report. I also note, your comment there about the resource and capacity. So I would just again turn it to senior management here, just to hopefully they've taken note of those comments, because the fraud investigation has been very important for the council, and I wouldn't want to see it diminished in its the resource or support that you give from them. Yeah, it's clearly not easy when you're something of a one-man band. So hopefully that can be addressed as we move forward.
We also note the rate of return on investment.
Any other questions for Jose?
Just on that point, the resource thing, I am working with, because I fall under housing management now. I've moved from internal audit to housing management. I am working closely with Hugh now on addressing the resource issue. So that is being addressed at the moment.
Great, thank you for telling us that. So can I have a motion to note the fraud investigation summary?
Propose.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. That leads us on to our recurrent work programme. And Kimberly, I have your name here too.
I don't know why I put that.
To present it.
So before you is the recurrent annual work programme. As you can see, we do rotate these items throughout the year. However, what I would ask, and this is more actually to officers rather than to members, is that I think it's got a little bit messy where we've had reports delayed and we've moved them on, and then we've not really cleaned up the programme. So if officers could actually just look at the work programme and just sort of refine it for me as to what will be coming, when, where, how, and etc. That'd be lovely.
Message received.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that. Members, does any member have any observations, comments on the programme as put before us? We do look at this every meeting, so it's an opportunity to move things forward or make observations that things aren't on here. But this is meant to be the sort of the regular.
It is the
things
regular,
that we
but
do.
obviously members, through you, Chair, members can raise items to be brought to the meeting. We obviously have at the end of the work programme the sort of the standard reports that we receive, but members can raise. For example, we discussed earlier about getting the head of HR to come along, so members can bring up items that they wish to add to the agenda.
Just to pick up on your point, I think it would be helpful here. We've already discussed the annual governance statement and some of the confusion about when something has to be approved. If there was a sort of a hard deadline for external reporting or in line with the constitution that we're meant to review something annually, I think it ought to be clear here on that. So I think we'll just note this programme, and any members who have any observations on it, if they want to route them through me onto officers. Thank you. Kimberly, we do not have any items where we need to exclude
Not that I'm aware of,
the
Chair.
press and public. Did we have any other business item? But if we don't, I'd like to suggest that invite members, if there is any other business that they'd like to raise, to raise. Hearing none, I shall conclude this meeting at 8:55. And thank you all those who have called in, and the officers in particular for their reports and their hard work in the last quarter. Thank you all very much, and we will see you again in June, if not before. Thank you very much.
In the members' room, I can go anywhere. Oh.